listening, this confession does contain a reference to the BBC. Okay.
Oh dear.
Okay. In fact, it comes very early in this confession.
Right.
James says, in the early 1990s, I was a budding young journalist for a BBC local radio station somewhere up north. I was really chuffed to be working for such a fine institution so soon out of college. A place of world-beating journalism, a voice you can trust, and all that. I even had a photo ID pass with a graphic of the World Atlas on it to make me feel really puffed up. In the early days, I would accept any news shift on offer, and as I was new, that would mean all the rubbish ones, like the so-called graveyard shift, or very early morning reporter shift, or any weekend work. It was tough, stressful, but great fun. I was keen to impress my bosses and earn some much-needed money after university. One of the jobs I loved was the Saturday and Sunday shift, writing the news pages for CFAX. Now, they were long, 10-hour shifts, so the money was good. For those who don't know, CFAX was like a writing puzzle. The paragraphs had to be perfectly square, and that meant that words had to fit each line exactly, with no excess spaces. And they had to be accurate, obviously. There was a very strict CFAX rule book, and I stuck to it, and I would take great pride in my news pages. As there were no radio bulletins past 11 a.m, I was pretty much on my own all day, which I also loved, mainly because if I was particularly hungover, I used to take a nap in the soundproof news booth.
Those are the days.
Absolute bliss.
Yes.
My job was to write up any stories of the day. I would call the police, the fire or ambulance to see if anything had happened worthy of a page on CFAX. It was a lovely job. I'd sit there with my headphones on, listening to a rival radio station because it played better music, writing up perfectly square pages of copy in an empty newsroom with no bosses breathing down my neck. But it was when listening to the other local radio stations that I noticed something really annoying. Their news bulletin would be exactly the same as what I had written on CFAX. Every phrase, every word, every quote. I was furious. This was blatant plagiarism. And this was not just one local station. I listened across all 5 in our city.
Wow.
Different times.
Yeah.
And they too were using the exact words from my CFAX pages. These journalists were letting me do all the hard work.
Yeah.
I realised I was technically writing the news bulletins for 5 local stations. This would not have bothered me so much, but I'd previously applied to work at those radio stations, but told I wasn't good enough. But now it seemed my journalism was good enough. So understandably, this really annoyed me, so I decided sabotage was my only option, and I started a little game. Occasionally, when writing a story, I would plant a wild inaccuracy, knowing these lazy so-called journalists would not bother to double-check, but just copy it off the telly and read it out like it was their next bulletin. One story came in about a spate of house burglaries in the area. The suspect was described as around 5'7" tall, but I wrote on my CFAX page that the suspect was a massive 7'5" tall.
Wow.
And sure enough, my lazy counterparts copied it and read it out across all the local radio stations. No one had thought to question this. How it was that this giant and probably the world's tallest burglar was on their patch, or why the police hadn't been able to catch such a man-mountain, or indeed, how does such a tall man get into people's houses in the first place?
Quite right.
Once I heard that they'd all copied my CFAX page, I corrected it, but the local radio stations carried on with their wrong information all day. A childish game, I know, but I just wanted revenge. And so it continued for a few weeks at least. There was the 19-stone dog.
Wow.
The 400-metre tall tree that had blown over to block a road. And the 11-year-old boy who achieved 5 grade A's at A-level. All these ridiculous facts reported by all the other radio stations without question. A 400-metre tree?
Really?
So, Simon and the team, I wish to seek forgiveness for spreading so many untruths. I wanted to teach the others a lesson. These deliberate inaccuracies didn't stay up for long, just enough time for all the other radio stations to copy it and make fools of themselves. And the other bit of good news was that I didn't last long in local news. It clearly wasn't for me. I went to work in TV instead. There's plenty more confessions there too, which we will await and we will enjoy as soon as they come in. But James, a splendid tale of local journalism going slightly wrong. Sister Jackie Brambles.
I think it's kind of reassuring to know that BBC management were well on top of every bulletin, and they did not seem to question these absurdities either. Good to know they were on the ball. The only reason I'm not forgiving is that you didn't go far enough. You could have taken that way, way, way further, which I would have greatly admired. So, yeah, you should have whacked up the odds and the stakes a lot higher than that.
No forgiveness from Sister Jackie, brother from another guy.
Yes, I mean, this absolutely rings bells, as any journalist knows, that it's always massively frustrating when you hear someone else parroting off the stuff that you've done yourself. So I am definitely going to forgive on this one. And I also concur with Jackie. Let's aim our fire at the BBC management. All their fault. Again, unlucky sunshine. I mean, James did end up working in telly, so, it didn't turn out quite so well for him either. But everything is, worked out in the end, doesn't it? And for the BBC management.
We await further confessions from James, and we await the people's verdict. Do you forgive James, please, for his indiscretions about the 7.5-foot burglar, the 400-metre tree, and the 11-year-old with 5 grade A's at A-level?